Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is on, right? Yes, it on. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for hanging in there for the last session of the afternoon. But I guess, the enticement of dessert perhaps is making everyone stay. My name is Renée Landers, and I'm a professor of law at Suffolk University Law School. And I also am the faculty director of the Health and Biomedical Law concentration that we have for JD students, and a new program called the Master of Science in Law Life Sciences program, which is why we're here today, which is an interdisciplinary program, a new program. We had the brilliant idea of starting it in 2020, which, obviously we've been somewhat, kind of behind schedule ever since, for all the reasons that everyone understands. But it's the idea is to offer an interdisciplinary program to help train people and prepare them for careers in the life sciences. You don't have to have a law degree to enter the program. We're hoping that people who are scientists who need to know a little bit of law and a little bit of business will enroll in the program, and so lawyers who need to know more science. Lawyers are math and science averse historically, but are learning that we need to know these things too. And also business people who need to know and understand a little bit about the law and business aspects of the life sciences sector. And so this program today has been very, has provided us with a lot of very useful information. And we hope to, keep working with a lot of people in this room going forward in the future. As was explained in the last session, our topic this afternoon is to focus on recruitment, education, and training to prepare people specifically for the life sciences and biotech industries. And we've had a lot of information today about some of the challenges that the current environment presents to all of your companies in hiring, and the challenges for hiring, the challenges for retention, and the challenges for building a pipeline, educational pipeline and preparation pipeline for diverse and inclusive workforces for now and in the future. And so I won't repeat all of that information that you've heard throughout the day, but this is an opportunity to hear from other professionals who've had some experience in working on these issues throughout their careers to generate ideas. And then I'm well aware that in most professional audiences like this, that people in the audience maybe have as much to say and as much to contribute as the people on the panel. We just sort of are lucky enough to be on the panel, but we hope to leave time at the end to hear from all of you, to hear your comments and your suggestions about creative and, as they said in the session before lunch, disruptive things you might be doing to address some of these concerns. So I'm pleased that our panel today includes Laurie Halloran, who's the president and CEO of Halloran Consulting Group, who has extensive experience in biotech, particularly on the clinical research side. Irene Porro, the director of the McAuliffe Center for Integrated Science Learning here at Framingham State University, our host institution today. And she's developed and manages the MetroWest STEM Education Network. We also have Philip J. Sisson, who is the president of Middlesex Community College, which, obviously is one of the institutions that's key to addressing some of the concerns we've been talking about today. And Rita Smith, who's the regional business HR director for the U.S. and Puerto Rico in Pharma for AbbVie. She has a lot of experience in partnering with local community colleges and high schools on developing awareness of opportunities in biotech, which we have been learning today is one of the challenges we face. So we'll proceed for the next 35 or 40 minutes with a panel discussion, and then, as I said, open it up for audience questions and conversation. So I'm going to start with a first question for Laurie Halloran. So tell us a little bit about the experiences in biotech that led you to focus on workforce development issues and your experience with apprenticeships programs that seek to develop diverse candidates for the field.
So I have a very long, winding road of being in life science and recognizing that the people that I worked with didn't know what they were doing. So a long time ago, many years ago, I suggested and nominated myself to do training at Par Excel when they were 50 people, and went back and got a corporate training and development degree, and then started my own business. But what I've noticed is that people are constantly competing for everyone. And so 2 years ago, we have a roundtable breakfast series, and the host gets to choose the topic. And the host for this one, my partner in crime, Manny Lazaro, said, "Why don't we stop stealing each other's people?" And I said, "Well, we can't stop stealing each other's people until we make new people." So that originally was the idea that started the apprenticeship program. And I wanted it to have some legitimacy. So I went to Mass Bioed because I figured that's the best place to go to get it, what it needs, and the cross-state opportunity. That kind of summarizes it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's good. That's very good.
20 years.
That's excellent. Well, we all have to start somewhere. And then for Irene, Porro, can you tell us a little bit about the work with the McAuliffe Center at Framingham State here, and the thought process and experiences that led you to create the MetroWest STEM education network?
Right. So let's start with McAuliffe Center. And I need to make a tiny correction to the MetroWest thing. I did not create the MetroWest STEM Education Network. It was established in 2007 with the rest of the regional STEM networks. I was very lucky that I joined FSU in 2014, and I think by 2016, I took on the leadership of the network. So just because I know I have colleagues in the room, that probably I'm like,
She's not stealing.
Yeah. So going back to, but my main role is, of course, directing the Krista McAuliffe Center. For some of you might be a familiar name, but also you might be familiar with the center. We were established 27 years ago to run simulation of space missions. So this is what we currently still do here on campus. Between 10,000, 12,000, mostly middle school students, also high school students, come to our center every year to practice the simulations that are really a role play kind of activity where they experience different roles within a space mission, different skills that they need to develop to make sure that the mission has success. That's what we were created for. When I was brought on board, though, I mean, my experience, to be honest, is not so much with middle school kids. My experience is really at the high school level, transition to college. So, I mean, the last few years at the McAuliffe Center, and in collaboration, of course, with FSU, we really started to think how we can transform, reconceptualize, honestly, the work that we are doing at the center, keeping, of course, the work that we're doing with the middle schooler, but really focusing much more of our efforts at the high school level, and again, college students that we have here on campus. We are such a great resource, why not? As part of that process, again, I brought in my experience in running apprenticeship programs. I was so happy that the word resonated so loudly this morning. I've been running apprenticeship programs for almost 20 years, and I know the power and the force of this kind of programs, also the resources that they need, of course, and in developing those non-specific skills, the problem solving, the teamwork, the communication skills that all we know. So I brought this on board, and now we are in the process of redesigning the whole center, where, yes, we'll continue providing the services we have been doing for so long, but we will include a really new focus on simulations, where we understand that through simulation labs, we can really provide that intermediate steps for, again, both high schoolers and college students to get them to the actual lab, a place where you can build the competence, but also the confidence for being in that space. Now, MetroWest, very briefly, Again, as part of that, my role as director, I also took on managing the MetroWest network. For those who are not familiar with the Region STEM networks, we were really established to carry forward the priority of the Massachusetts STEM Council. And, yes, K-12 education connected with the schools and school districts, like vocational schools that often we have forgotten in this process, right? Bringing them back in. But most of all, I feel that a lot of what I've been doing is to try to really bring to the table all the different stakeholders in the MetroWest region, in our case, that are interested in promoting STEM education and workforce development, but from different perspectives. So from the K-12 districts and higher education, of course, but industry, nonprofits, and so on.
Great, thank you. Laurie, I forgot to ask you at what level you're kind of, working in your program.
Yeah, and your explanation was so much more comprehensive than mine. So I thought of all kinds of things. So I'm glad you came back to me. We originally thought about internships, but everybody and their brother has internships, and in working with Carla Kalanian at Mass Bioed, and then ultimately Sunny, we realized that a way better direction to go in would be the apprenticeship program for clinical trial assistants. There's hardly anyone in nursing school or pharmacy school or in most of the programs who even know that this industry exists. And we have to get the word out there. That to me is the biggest thing that we have to band together with as information providers to people, again, in grammar school, middle school, because my kids went to school in 2 miles down the road from Boston, and the high school didn't have any idea that we're in the biggest industry in the state. So.
All right, great, thank you, and I'm glad also that we came back to you. So, Phil, this is sort of a good segue from Laurie's comment just now, because your institution is focused on training like biotechnicians. So maybe you could say a little bit about what you've been doing.
Sure, thank you. I think we're one of many higher education institutions that are in the room today. My colleague David Padell from Mass Bay is here. Our colleagues and pals from Northeastern who have really been part of our journey. We have one of the oldest, it's a 32-year-old biotech program at Middlesex Community College. And what is disheartening is to still see from industry quotes about the fact that in order to enter the industry, you need to start with a baccalaureate degree. We have to dispel that myth now. We've been doing this for a very, very long time, and doing it through advisory boards with extraordinary curriculum work, providing thousands of manufacturing technicians, and we continue to do that work in very large numbers. And so I think what's important is we had to try and figure out a couple of years ago, we were very fortunate to be connected with Northeastern, first of all, who has been a partner for a long time. The coordinator of our program, of this 32-year program, is still the coordinator of the program. I think she will be the coordinator of the program until the end of the program or her. And she's really a force to be reckoned with. She came from Northeastern with Ph.D. and has been really a remarkable model for what can happen in a community college when the right faculty are chosen and when the industry connections are there. And when students get all the wraparound services they need to really be successful, because the sky's the limit at that point. And that's Mary Lucy Bladen, and I'll mention her simply because that connection with Northeastern has been incredibly important to us. We have a remarkable opportunity with an NSF grant called A to M that you heard about earlier, that not only provides an opportunity for a student to have a certificate or associate's degree, but to continue fully funded to go to Northeastern to get their baccalaureate and their master's degree. So that A to M program is just part of the success story. But more importantly, talk about you folks stealing from each other. We found that students were leaving the institution early, right? We had a curriculum, we had a pathway, we had maps, we had a certificate, we had an associate's degree. Students would get through 2 of our courses, that they really needed, methods, CNGP, and all of those other pieces that were technical skills, hands-on skills. And employers were stealing them before they finished their associate's degree, before they finish their certificate. In fact, we have a great representative in the room that I'll mention in a moment. But so our solution was a new Learn and Earn program, because what we wanted to make sure was that the pipeline continued, that students were not just immediately entered into entry-level positions. And we're an institution that 46% of our students are students of color. This is one of our few minority-majority programs in the institution. 64% of the students that are in our biotech program are students of color. And so, tremendous opportunity to diversify your workforce. So we get that, but recruiters were taking them long before they finished. And so what we did was we tried to flip it all on its head and say, how can we work with employers so that the learn component of Earn can continue, and develop a system by which students could complete those two courses that were so essential, immediately get out into the workforce full-time, and still continue to get their certificate or their associate's degree with the institution. So we had to work with, thanks to some work with the 1-8 Foundation, we were able to work through a process to determine how we could change the curriculum, how we could meet students where they were, how to accommodate the Pittman schedule, you name it. So not according to how the college wanted to offer its courses, but how industry wanted us to offer those courses, and so that students could work full-time. And then we needed to create MOUs with a number of partners. AbbVie and Takeda were our first. We've reached out to 5 other partners. We've had 4 cohorts in this of about 20 students each. And those students are now going out after 2 courses and getting a job, making a living, as opposed to the kind of living that they were making at McDonald's or TJX, or all fine institutions. But the bottom line was, give them a chance to work in their field so they see the full range of possibilities and get connected and have that kind of apprenticeship opportunity really early on. So we're highly successful. We've been really thrilled with the results. The partnerships have been deepened with each of those industry partners. Mentorships are included. Our MCC alum help to mentor students. And Lexi, I'm just gonna call you out because you're here. Lexi is a student, was in Lawrence, didn't necessarily think about the biotech field, learned about Learn and Earn through an info session, and we have IDS weekends and opportunities to really get students to understand the program. But Lexi became a Learn and Earn student. Lexi is now a training coordinator at Ultragenics. She hasn't even finished her associate's degree, right? So that's the quality of students that are coming out of community college programs. And we need to do everything we can, Lexi, to highlight your story and many others. So
That's a really terrific story. And
I have one more thing to ask.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I'm not going to be the pest on the panel, but you are so further evolved. This is our first year, and I feel like we have a huge amount to learn from each other, and that's one of the reasons I'm really interested in being here. So.
Right. And so, I mean, now that we've got the perspective from Phil, from the educational community, we have a representative from AbbVie here, Rita Smith, who is going to tell us about the work that their company has done with these apprenticeship programs with Middlesex, with Quinsigamond Community College, and then now the Mass Bioed's Life Sciences Apprenticeship Program. So tell us about it from the company perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So Phil and I didn't practice this in advance, but we almost could have. So it's just as he described and talked about, from an industry perspective, we are absolutely looking for manufacturing techs, as we call man techs, on the floor to produce those products that we need for our patients. And we were seeing that, we were saying we're stealing from each other, and how can we do this a little bit differently? And then I'll add the context of geography. I'm not going to ask how many in the room are in central Massachusetts versus, eastern Massachusetts, but that's another kind of barrier from time to time. And so when we first learned of the Earn and Learn program, we were thrilled, and to the point of having a diverse population who's already sort of ready for a career in industry. Couldn't have been more music to our ears. And so we partnered with Middlesex Community College, and they were a fantastic partner. And just as Phil was saying, it's about making sure that you are listening to your partner, that you've got some of the things that are so important to us when it comes to being able to produce those products and being able to come to the floor and being able to be ready, and not having to do all of that training that we sometimes have to do. So we started, with them, and I still remember, I can't remember the professor's name. She's a little short lady who's awesome. And yes, that's exactly who she is. And we were just, going into her lab, and her passion and her energy gave us such a great comfort as to the types of students that we would be getting in the Earn and Learn program. And so I think one of the things that was so important to us, we get the sort of ready-made candidate, and then we're able to identify and put our own sort of spin on things. So we also have, different types of programs from an industry perspective, rotational programs, programs from interns to, full-time students. And we do those mentorships, and we have kind of a program for them anyway. And so we were able to take the Earn and Learn and sort of merge it with what we already have, so that now that person has the wraparound services. They've got that good understanding of our company and our industry and how we move through. And then they are able to go back and understand where they can go and grow from being a tech on the floor to becoming a supervisor, coordinator, perhaps, in other roles. So the Earn and Learn program, we're now in our third iteration, our third cohort, and it gets better and better each time we get more and more students. I'll have to be honest, initially we thought we were going to be the only employer, and then Takeda came along, so then we had to compete a little bit, but that's okay, competition's good. And so now there's even more employers, but at the end of the day, it's really important for us to have that kind of pipeline so that we can continue to grow and build. And so the more industry can do that, it brings and attracts more individuals to think about their careers differently, to think about biotech as a career option. The other thing that we learned too, just as you were describing the diversity, they have a different opportunity altogether, right? They're really kind of increasing their lot in life. It's okay to work at, the TJ Maxx's and the other places, but to have something that you can grow into that has some longevity, and let's be honest, industry can be really, really lucrative, if I could say it that way, for your own family, right? And the things that you're able to bring to bear. So that was our first foray, the Earn and Learn program with Middlesex Community College. And then we started working with Quinsigamond College, which is a little bit closer in proximity to where we're actually.
Can you just say something about the size of the programs, how many people you have at a particular time?
Sure.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So when we first started, we were actually looking for Middlesex to give us 10 students. And it just, very early on, the pandemic started happening and things like that. So we had to quickly shift and regroup. So our first cohort were 2 students. And then one of them had to drop due to family considerations. If I'm honest, I don't remember what last year's cohort is, and I think we're up to 10 now. So it just took a couple of years to get us to where we'd like to be. If we could get 20, we would get 20. There is no shortage of opportunity, which is good. That means we're growing and that we've got some good pipeline products, and so we need those individuals. So it took a little longer than we would have liked, but circumstances happen, and it was okay because that gave us the opportunity to slow down and pause. Sometimes you have to go slow so you can go fast later. So it's worked out really well. So Quinsigamond Community College, again, closer in proximity, but we've had this wonderful partnership with them anyway. And then what we've learned from the Middlesex Learn and Own program is how can we continue to build that with that particular group as well. So we're still in the process of identifying the cohort there and how that's actually going to work. But when it comes to being able to have that ready-made workforce, again, we're excited that we have another partner that we can start to bring in and draw more students to us. And then now, I know we said hi to Carla already, but one of the things that was so amazing about Mass Bioed and Carla and the work that she's been doing is we talked a lot about the apprenticeship program. And I'll never forget the first time she came to AbbVie. I was brand new here from North Chicago, and she talked about biotech apprentices. And I said, what is this woman talking about? How do you have apprentices in the scientific kind of community? And then as the community started to develop and grow, then she and the Mass Bioed team had their first apprenticeship in the Boston area. I said, Carla, where is our apprenticeship program? And now we're here in Central Mass. And so we're super excited that we have a pretty robust cohort that's coming in This will be our first cohort for the Mass Bioed Apprenticeship Program. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we have 8 or 9 folks identified for that program as well. And so they're going to join us this fall after they've completed a few courses. So now we've got 3 different opportunities that we're pipelining folks for. And even that sometimes isn't enough. I can tell you right now, if you go to AbbVie.com careers and look for non-exempt, you'll still see about 6 or 7 openings that I still have. So there couldn't be even more, you know, and that's just one company need, right, for non-exempts to come and grow their career. So it's just been amazing work. And I love Mass Bioed so much. I joined the board. So now I get the first pick, hopefully, of some of these folks.
That's the compensation. That's the very generous compensation you get for being on the board, right? Everyone.
Just kidding, Sonny.
So we've got a lot of interesting threads in this conversation now, and I think maybe we could try to drill down on some of the specifics. So already Rita has alluded to location perhaps being a challenge or a barrier in some ways to thinking about how to engage in these apprenticeship or training programs or making connections. So Laurie, what are some of the barriers that you've observed and how have you tried to overcome them?
The biggest barriers for us, I think, are the companies being willing to try it. They don't necessarily want people who don't already have a bachelor's, and they tend not to have a huge number of open positions. It's usually a little smaller than AbbVie. So they may have one open CTA position, and they don't want a person coming in who doesn't know the job. The next set of challenges, which we are addressing as a group, are what happens after the education, because the on-the-job training is as important, if not more important, because they just have a little basics about what the industry is, but what they really need is practical, write a protocol, write a consent form. It's a much more varied kind of job than a manufacturing technician. So but we're working on that. We're having regular meetings with the people who are managing the first cohort, and we just at lunch came up with the idea of doing a week-long training program for the companies who join, to have their managers understand exactly how to set it up for success.
I want to come back to that point because I think that's another really important thing. And I think a lot of Rita's comments, raise this question of how do you prepare people to actually help people when they come into the companies and to allow them to learn and to be successful in that environment. But just before we get to that point, Renée, we've been talking about this focus on college students with Phil and Rita. But you're focused at high school and the middle school level. Why is it important to start there? I'm of the view that, lessons of a lifetime are learned at a very early age. So maybe if we got elementary school education right, then everything else would take care of itself. But we're not there yet.
No. Let me start though saying something I think is very important that we all get on the same page with. When we talk about the STEM workforce development issue, or the life sciences for that matter, specific workforce development issue, let's agree that this is a complex issue. It's not a linear issue. Linear is if we just all did this, fix kindergarten, right? And if we just all did this, we would solve the problem. Well, let's agree and let's understand that that's not the case. So it's a complex issue, and as such, you want to address it in any areas that you can. So from a temporal point of view, if you want, yes, it starts early. Starts in kindergarten, starts elementary. It's not so much that we have to put stuff into the kid's head, right? It's not so much a content development. I think, I use these 2 words a lot, competence and confidence. Competence is something that, of course, we are familiar with. It's a content knowledge. We keep growing it and gradually, and we have good pedagogy. We have good curricula in our schools right now. The confidence piece is a part that we often forget. And because it's messy, it's complicated. So this is where working for example, at the middle and high school level, and not so much in the school context, and not because schools are not doing a good job, but we put so much pressure and effort, efforts, yes, but pressure on what happens in school. We have so much many more opportunities outside of regular school hours to really engage middle, high school, college students in, we heard earlier in the presentation, contextualized learning. Why do we have to wait until college to bring the students in a contextualized biopharma project? We can do it at the middle school level. We can do it at the high school level with the content knowledge that they can, it's appropriate level. But what happens when we say this is a real problem and we are working all together in solving it? The kids start learning that there are different skills and different content knowledge that they need, and they are motivated to both develop the skills and develop the content knowledge. Instead, what we are often doing, let's load them with the content knowledge, and then eventually we hope that when they get into the workforce, they know how to problem solve. So it's really, the ingredients are all there. We already are doing a lot of these things, but in my opinion, too often we don't do them in the right order. We have just to change the recipe. The ingredients are there, but let's change the recipe. So again, starting in the middle or high school level is important. It's because it's when this, I can be the scientist, or maybe I can be the manager, I can be the leader. They also have the opportunity at this age to try different roles, right? Again, this is not linear. This is not putting them on this course. We've done it. We know it doesn't work, right? Give them opportunities to work in different roles around real problems that they approach, what is appropriate for their age. And also let me say the very last thing, because I'm not just pursuing life sciences. Of course, learning opportunities for me is really important. STEM, since we had to use that word, but the sciences and the math. Let's give, in particular, the younger students, again, middle and high, both, opportunity to develop, to engage in project solving and problem solving and project in different disciplines that are all related to science. I'm an astrophysicist by training. I've done a lot of project of this kind in astrophysics. Do you think that most of those students became astronomers? Of course not. Maybe one or two in 20 years. That was not the goal. It was an easy way or an interesting way for them to get into that contest where they develop, again, both the content knowledge, but also the confidence to say, yes, I can be a scientist, I can be a manager, I can be a communicator of science. We need all these different roles.
Right, and there was the slide in one of the presentations this morning, right, that showed all the adjacent professions that are important to the success of biotech and life sciences, finance, marketing, communications, law, in regulatory affairs, that was another one. Yeah, all of these things that are really important skills, but, connected to the industry. Phil, coming back to you. So you've had a lot of exemplary partnerships with industry. Why have they been successful, do you think?
Well, two things. First, I want to address the issue of the fact that a lot of us think about education as linear. So you can't talk about high school students and community college students and even four-year students that are in four-year degree programs as separate. I mean, community colleges started because of their connection with high schools. That's really our origin. And in fact, we have 26 partner high schools. 20% of my undergraduates that are in their freshman or first semester or two are all in high school, right? Because of early college, because of dual enrollment. So the overlaps are already there in terms of being able to accelerate this. I know Mass Bay is working on a program. We're having conversations with the Smith family about how do we take what's already happening in the Voc Tech schools, how do we take what's already happening in a lot of our early college programs that have STEM pathways and provide opportunities for students to get the basic science and math that they need so that they're really competent, but also to get these hands-on courses that they need so that when they graduate from high school, they already have a certificate from the community college they're ready for a learn and earn or an apprenticeship kind of program. So they've got the skills that they need. So I think we have to sort of be careful about keep thinking about sort of things in a linear fashion, because we've got opportunities and programs that can address adult learners because you're working with community college, but you also have partnerships that are really important in working with high schools. As for industry partners, we were very fortunate that the 1-8 Foundation was able to fund something that wouldn't normally happen in a community college. We have some career services that exist with people that are working with students to develop resumes, et cetera. But what we were able to build into the program was really a business developer, somebody that was going to coordinate the program, that essentially was going to reach out to AbbVie, that was going to reach out to Takeda and Pfizer and our other new partners to really explain the program, work with HR, have a conversation about what that memorandum of understanding included, convince them about what a living wage was so that all of our learn and earn students can make $20 to $25 an hour while they're still completing their certificate, to be able to get those students out of other jobs that they're doing, 2 and 3 of those jobs, oftentimes to take care of their families while they're in a community college. So that depth of the partnership really happened because we had someone who was constantly working with HR and companies and developing this concept of how we could develop together a mentorship program so that we could make sure that those students were ready for the interview that they're going to have with Rita or someone else from her firm. So they were prepared to be able to really have confidence in the skills that they have and the competence that they can identify from what they've already learned with the hands-on work that they've done in the program. So getting those students ready, because then when Rita was talking about the competition, all of our industry partners now compete for the same pool of learn and earn students, and they get to choose, and then the student gets to choose where they want to go for that learn and earn experience. So it gives that student that kind of career prep experience and opportunity, and then we can then develop a mentorship program that identifies key leaders and workers within, whether it's a shift supervisor or an MCC alum for the program that can serve in a mentorship capacity to show that student what the trajectory is in a career, not just the entry-level position, but what are the opportunities if someone's going to be loyal to a company. So they're going to make a living wage, they're going to work 40 hours, they're going to get a mentor, and at the end, you're going to get first pick of those students that you want to hire. So it's a brilliant solution to an influx of really making sure that you have the diverse workforce that you need, and that our students who need a living wage have that and are gaining experience in an industry that they can get excited about, that we can sell them about what are the opportunities for them going forward. So I think it's been a lot of additional work. I think it's a lot of time, multiple meetings with HR, and also how do we convince industry that the recruiters, the third-party recruiters that they were using, they no longer need. They have us, right? They have the community colleges that can provide that possibility for those technicians. So I think it's developing a relationship and developing trust, and that's critically important in order to be able to build a program that's successful.
Shh, don't tell the recruiters that we had this conversation. But I think the emphasis on the living wage point is really important, especially if you think of, what some of the other presentations have alluded to, the challenges of the cost of housing in some of the larger metropolitan areas or in the state generally, cost of transportation, all of these things really are barriers to people being able to, find the resources to focus on their education. I'm involved in this other study that just came out this week called Economic Security for the 21st Century, and focuses on a lot of these workplace issues that could really improve the feeling and the reality of economic security for workers. And I think that's an educational process for employers to have to engage in. So Rita, one last question, then we're going to throw it out to you, to all of you to talk about this. Two questions. One is, how do you identify the students who are going to be good fits for these programs in your company? And second, what the point that I mentioned earlier, what training and support do you give to your employees who are responsible for mentoring and helping develop these interns and these apprentices?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we think about the types of employees that we want to have at the end, that's how we identify the types of students that we want. So we've talked a lot about, being able to train folks and being able to give them those skills. But at the heart of it, when my site director and I sat down, we said a lot of the things that we're looking for are those strong qualities that make up a good, strong employee. So you think about the commitment, right, to what the job that you're doing. You think about the drive to perform your very best. You think about the idea of wanting to continue your career, right, and go further. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean going up, right? We've got a lot of different roles where you may go. We call it a lattice. Rather than a ladder. So you might take lateral roles, right, to continue to build your knowledge, skill base, et cetera, across the entire industry or across the entire company and things that you're doing. So we're looking at those kinds of skills. Who is demonstrating leadership? Are you leading, I don't know, your youth group, or are you the crew manager at the job that you're at right now? Because that just demonstrates your ability to lead other people and get them aligned, and you're sort of meeting them where they are, right? All the good things that good leaders do. So we're looking for those kinds of qualities, and then we add on, okay, so what are your skill sets, and what are the things that you've learned in your program, whether it's a certificate program or associateship program. And those are the things that we can teach, to be honest. And we can partner with our partners, either earn and learn, or apprenticeship, or just on the job training, quite frankly. So we're looking at those kinds of things when we look at the types of employees that we'd like to have going forward. And that's our criteria. So can you remind me the second question?
How do you train the mentors?
Training them. So absolutely. Particularly at AbbVie, we're very, very deliberate and intentional around making sure that we bring that whole person into the conversation. So when we think about training, we definitely think about how do we don't even really call it training, we're talking about development, and we're talking about how do you get increased skill sets and things like that. So for us, it's definitely about the mentorship and making sure someone has a go-to person. So we actually have both a buddy and a mentor, because they can play a couple of different roles. The buddy is your peer, obviously, and can kind of give you the scoop on things that may not be written and all of those good things, where your mentor is giving you a lot more advice. But then it is about identifying what's your aspiration? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? And trying to be sure that we're transparent and clear about where you are today, which sometimes doesn't always take place. So people know exactly where they stand. And then let's talk about your aspiration. How do you get there? So if you want to be the CEO one day, that's fine. We know not everybody will make it, but if that's your aspiration and here's where you are today, then what are the things you're going to need to get there, right? And that might be lattice. That might be you might have to go to school and get the 4-year degree. Or if you want to be the CEO, that means you probably have to get a master's, and probably in business administration. But we're going to talk to you about that. We're going to make sure that we're providing those opportunities where we can to help you develop and grow. And then we're going to talk to you about what that means. I think a lot of times what ends up happening is I might give you an additional assignment and you think you're just taking on additional work. But no, I've given you that assignment because your aspiration was you want to be a people leader. And here's how we're going to start that process. So for us, it's about bringing all those different elements together as we think about your training, your development, and your growth.
Yeah, let's add one thing, and then meanwhile, this is the warning to all of you to think about what you might add to the conversation, what questions you might ask, what other challenges you've encountered that we could all kind of brainstorm about this afternoon.
Just briefly, I love your talking about mentorship, because that's another of those processes that actually can start at a high school level, exactly with that idea of helping the students understand what are the possibilities and the opportunities for them, number one. But number two, to understand what it takes to get there. And so again, same kind of process that you can do at the high school level, with maybe without any specific, not necessarily specific field where we are going to operate. You may figure out which one we are most interested in, but definitely it's in terms of skills and again, that confidence. One quick thing also about barriers, though. We've been talking about barriers at the employment, if you want, level, or maybe at the college level. When we think about middle school, maybe, but high school level, the barriers that prevent students from taking advantage of opportunities that already exist are multiple. Now, if we talk about the place like MetroWest, you alluded to transportation. Our students outside of the Boston areas don't really have access to reliable or even existing public transportation that can take them to the university, out of school time program, or to their businesses where they could have those internships that exist. They are funded, but they cannot get there. We run currently an internship program here at the McAuliffe Center. You could see the kids who can come are the one who have parents who can take them there, or who have a neighbor who volunteers at 8 o'clock in the morning to take them over. Great, but we need to think about, we talk about scaling up. Well, if we want to scale up, it's not just putting more funding for more, for example, internship or programs like that. That's important. I mean, I'm not taking it. But we need to put the funding, the thinking, the creativity, imagination to solve these other problems. And maybe we had to create, if we talk about transportation, a more reliable public transportation service that allows these young people to go from home to the places where they can grow intellectually and workforce-wise.
No, I think that those are really good points. I mean, it's sort of the same point about how the industry needs to really be thinking, about all these other barriers that people encounter, housing, childcare, all these things like that, and really being advocates for better public policies on all those issues, as well as drug prices or no device tax, whatever the issue du jour happens to be on that side of the industry. So, so all of you, thoughts, comments? Yes, sir.
Students at the community colleges are considered non-traditional age, 25 and above. So while it's critically important to talk about elementary, middle school, high school, that progression and the experiences that traditional age students have, a substantial portion of the workforce opportunity is with non-traditional age students. So you do need to think about them. They may not have had the K-12 experience of some of their peers. They may not have had some of those exposures. So you do need to think about them as a potential pool and what they might need additionally or different to successfully enter the workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely wanted to comment on that because that's one of the things that, again, we talked about when we talked about earn and learn. A lot of times the non-traditional students are the ones that are a little more grounded. They have an idea of their experiences. They know where they want to go. That drive we talked about, maybe that leadership we talked about, that experience translates to the workforce, right? So if you've done some things in your previous, employment life, you bring that into your workforce experience when you join an earn and learn or apprenticeship or, whatever that entry level position are. And oftentimes, again, you're much more grounded. You know what you want. You know how important it is. Things like that. So those are the exact type of folks that we're looking for when it comes to hiring.
Winter Duncanson, Boston University College of Engineering. My question is, what is that trigger? What's that tipping point that convinces companies that they can accept non-traditional students and that they'll be successful? Like, how did AbbVie get on board?
We were immediately grabbed by this idea of an apprenticeship program. So for me, I guess I don't maybe understand why other companies wouldn't be in that same frame of reference, same frame of mind. Maybe they just haven't had that opportunity to understand or learn more about these types of programs. But for us, I don't really see a tipping point, to be honest with you. For us, we were truly trying to figure out, where do we go to source talent? Where do we go to find, these hidden gems, like I like to call them, because they may not be in the recruiting workforce, talent pool or LinkedIn, right? A lot of these folks aren't in LinkedIn. So how do we go find these individuals? And so for us, it was a very easy sell. It was a very easy way to figure out, we've got diverse populations. You've got non-traditional folks who really do know what they want to do and where they want to go. You've got folks that are driven to be trained and understand, and they're hungry. You've got folks that are already, particularly in these types of programs, getting some educational experience and skill sets that we are going to be, building on. So for us, it was really, really simple and easy. It was a slam dunk in terms of how do we do that.
So Laurie, I think wants to add something.
Yes, remember, this is a large number from tiny companies to little little bit further along. So I would say the common thing that made the company take on an apprentice was the champion at the head of clinical development. The challenge is the champion wasn't necessarily the person who was dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. So that part we're evolving. And we had a call a couple of weeks ago with probably 35, 40 companies on it to hear about the experience so they can consider doing it next year. So I'm very hopeful that as we improve the program, most of what needs to be done takes place after the education and on the job.
Yes.
Hi, Sylvia Jarist, Corning Life Sciences. I was wondering, has there been any conversation, to your point, on stop stealing our people, to developing our people with these programs? Are any of the companies you're working with or talking to want to take their people and put into the program versus finding service industry,
It's a really great
hospitality
idea.
industry?
It's definitely a follow-on idea, but what I think was meant by the stop stealing is the individuals think that, oh, I've been in this job for a year now. I'm going to go over there and I'll make $30,000 more and I'll get a title change. So it was more about that. And that really falls to the company having some kind of real retention of their existing employees.
I just want to add to that. I think this development of the partnership that's so important is not just the mentorship, but getting students to understand what the benefits are so that when they get into that company that they can continue to take courses. And for the higher ed institution, if they have not completed the associates, which is in our case oftentimes after they're doing certificate and jumping right into learn and earn, is to think about how do we offer those courses at the company so that it's as easy for a cohort of students as possible. And we're hoping to begin to do that with a lot of our partners because I think that retention piece is so essential. It's part of what we want to have happen so the student and the individual will then find themselves connected and loyal to that institution, that company that's helping them get along in that trajectory, and how do we as a higher ed institution provide the additional courses for them to continue so that they can get, and how do they access the benefits like tuition remission and all of those other pieces?
No, so it could be a competitive advantage in hiring for companies if they do it well and if the information, is presented to prospective employees and that they can understand it.
So the real challenge is the manufacturing technicians have fairly similar jobs. And there's nothing standard about clinical research. There really isn't. So if you can spell names and you can send emails, some companies will hire you. And hopefully you get the on that job training, and other companies have really high expectations.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Hi, Becky Cho from Alnylam Pharmaceuticals. I had a question about how do you help prepare students for matching the expectations of students with the realities of the industry. So one of the things that we've had a challenge with is people understanding that we have second shifts and we may at some point add an overnight shift. And what does that mean for how they fit into their lives, as well as how that might impact their paycheck to get differentials. And then the other piece is understanding total rewards of your pay is not just your hourly or salaried pay. It is your 401k, it is your stock, and you may have retention awards that you should be considering before you look at a 10K increase by changing companies. So how do you help students to understand the reality of those aspects of the careers so that they can come in and advocate for themselves, but also speak the language that the HR professionals and talent acquisition are?
I think it starts with financial literacy that happens at a lot of community colleges now, that there's a tremendous amount of work about really preparing students for the world of work. What does that mean? How do they understand benefits? And then that has to trickle into what do we develop as part of the preparation so that when those students are going to Rita's interview, they not only have their resume, they not only have been through many, many mock interviews, taught about how can they showcase the skills that they've learned, technical skills in the program, and the soft skills, a term that all of us really don't like, but the ability to really problem solve and work in a team. But in that, we have to build in information so that we as an institution can work with the partner so the student really knows what's the benefits, what's the long-term benefits. There's a relationship that student is building by joining Learn and Earn. And once they do that, they're going to be spending a year with that company. And that's the other piece that has to happen with the retention element and the mentorship, is that they have to be free to know what questions they can ask and to ask those questions really openly and to get a full sense of what the benefits are and to really learn from their buddy and their mentors about how does that work within that particular culture.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Again, this is something that in a proper way can really start at the high school level. We are hiring right now paid summer interns, and because they are paid through the FSU systems, they are hired as contractors. They have to go through a lot of paperwork, taxes, and how to get their money deposited in a bank account, which of course can be a problem for other reasons. Now, sure, yeah, exactly. They are a high school student. Sure, parents are helping, but we as the organization that hires them, we really put an emphasis on is the student who has to go through that with help, with support, if it's the first time. But I think it's really important that we prepare our kids gradually, right? We cannot just wait for them to get to college to all of a sudden learn all this stuff. It's a gradual process, but it's very important to give them a sense of responsibility. You have to come to work every day. If you cannot come, you're going to call. If you're late, you're going to call. I mean, we just introduced this concept. The kids are like, if I'm late, yes, you have to let us know if you're late. You're going only to be paid for the time you work, by the way. Again, not only on the negative, you also were talking about the perks, the important side, but they are going to appreciate what else comes with that.
Right, and I also interpreted your question, the other part of your question was about really is flying in the face of what we've all experienced during the pandemic, right? That actually there are some jobs where you actually have to come and show up and be physically present. And healthcare is actually having, generally, more traditional healthcare, the same issue now. Nurses have always known that, part of the deal was, you have to kind of earn your stripes working the overnight shift or, that 3 to 11 shift. And, depending on your family situation, those actually could be great things, right? But it's this reality that, people have to face about what some of these jobs entail. I used to be on the board of an elementary school, and the head of the school has been talking recently about, hiring, newer teachers, younger teachers, who have, who want to work remotely. Well, it's an elementary school. You can't really do that on a, the pandemic was a one-off situation. But even before that, people wanted to have different things. So maybe we have to do things like, have more job sharing or, things like that to, try to meet some of these workers where they think they need to be about what their expectations are, about what is actually the job like. One more quick question and then it's dessert time. So these have been great questions and comments. I really appreciate that. Any parting words from anybody on the panel? I know everybody has such good ideas, so I hesitate to open the door to this. But Laurie, let Laurie have the last word.
The best idea that I got today was that there's a standard curriculum in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And there's never been anything like that in clinical research. So that's something to go and investigate.
Excellent. That's a great note on which to end that the takeaway and the learning from the session. So thanks so much for your attention, your comments, and hope to see all of you soon. And thank you to our panelists.